Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today, we are continuing our series on Emerson's journals. We are on journal collection number 29, dating from the year 1838 when the author was 35 years old. We are up to November 3rd. It seems late in the year because it is. However, Emerson wrote a lot in this period. So November 3rd to December 31st is actually quite a few pages. But with that said, we're going to try to get it all in this one video. I think we'll be able to do it pretty easily, actually. So with that said, I will go ahead and read the first entry here for our next part. It's November 3rd, and I'll go ahead and start. The Trismegisti. There is always a higher region of thought. Soar as high as you will, and in literature very few words are found touching the best thought. Laodamia. James Naylor's dying words. The address of the parliamentary soldier to the army and Coleridge's friend. And Samson Reed's oration. These are of the highest moral class. Come on, ye angels, who are to write with pens of flame the poetry of the new age. The old heathens who have written for us will not budge one step, neither Plato nor Shakespeare, until a natural majesty equal to their own and purer and of a higher strain shall appear. Goethe will die hard, even Scott dare stand his ground. Henry IV of France, a nascent Napoleon and the first European king. Means and wife. That's the true pathos and sublime of human life. We owe a good many valuable observations to people who are not very acute or profound, and who say the thing without effort which we want to have been long toiling for in vain. This and that other fact, that we kindle each other's interest so fast in what happens to be our present studies, and the rapid communication of results that is obviously possible between scholars of various pursuit, lead me to think that acquisition would be increased by literary society, that I could read more, learn faster by association with good scholars than I do or can alone. There are a few scholars. The mob of so-called scholars are unapt peasants caught late, coated over merely with a thin varnish of Latin and reading-room literature, but unlearned and unintelligent. They sleep in the afternoons, read little, and cannot be said to have faith or hope. For this reason, I think the reading of Sir William Jones's life, or the life of Gibbon, or the letters of Goethe might serve the purpose of shaming us into an emulating industry. I should not dare to tell all my story. A great deal of it I do not yet understand. How much of it is incomplete. In my straight and decorous way of living, native to my family and to my country, and more strictly proper to me, is nothing extravagant or flowing. I content myself with moderate languid actions, and never transgress the staidness of village manners. Herein I consult the poorness of my powers. More culture would come out of great virtues and vices, perhaps, but I am not up to that. Should I obey an irregular impulse, and establish every new relation that my fancy prompted with the men and women I see, I should not be followed by my faculties. They would play me false in making good their very suggestions. They delight in inceptions, but they warrant nothing else. I see very well the beauty of sincerity, and tend that way, but if I should obey the impulse so far as to say to my fashionable acquaintance, "You are a coxcomb, I dislike your manners, I pray you avoid my sight," I should not serve him nor me, and still less the truth. I should act quite unworthy of the truth, for I could not carry out the declaration with the sustained, even-minded frankness and love, which alone could save such a speech from rant and absurdity. We must tend ever to the good life. I told Jones Very that I had never suffered, that I could scarce bring myself to feel a concern for the safety and life of my nearest friends that would satisfy them, that I saw clearly that if my wife, my child, my mother should be taken from me, I should still remain whole, with the same capacity of cheap enjoyment from all things. I should not grieve enough, although I loved them. But could I make them feel what I feel, the boundless resources of the soul remaining entire when the particular threads of the relation are snapped, I should then dismiss forever the little remains of uneasiness I have in regard to them. November 4th. I wish society to be a congress of sovereigns without the pride, but with the power. Therefore I do not like to see a worthy woman resemble those flowers that cannot bear transportation, and when I behold her in a foreign house perceive instantly that she has lost an inch or two of height, her manners not so tall as they were at home. A woman should always challenge our respect, and never move our compassion. If they be great only on their own ground, and demure and restless in a new house, they have all to learn. If people were all true, we should feel that all persons were infinitely deep natures. But now, in an evening party, you have no variety of persons, but only one person. For, say what you will, to whom you will, they shall all render one and the same answer, without thought, without heart, a conversation of the lips. Chaucer. The religion of the early English wits is anomalous, so devout and so blasphemous in the same breath. The merriest tale concludes, "Thus endeth here my tale of January. God bless us and his motor, Saint Marie." Chaucer. Chaucer's canon had such wit and art that he could turn upside down all the ground between here and Canterbury, and pave it with silver and gold, yet was his overest slope not worth a mite. He is too wise in faith, as I believe. Thing that is overdone, it will not bereave. All right, as clerks say, it is a vice. Wherefore in that I hold him lewd and nice. For when a man hath over great a wit, full oft it happeth to misusen it. We do not justice to ourselves in conversation. An agreeable instance of this I have repeatedly remarked, when a man warmly opposes in conversation your opinion, even to an extreme, and afterwards, in his public discourse, tempers his opposition so freely with your thought that it is scarcely opposition. Religion. Our religion stands on numbers of believers, a very bad sign. Whenever the appeal is made, no matter how indirectly, to numbers, proclamation is then and there made that religion is not. He that finds God a sweet, enveloping thought to him never counts his company. Insanity. Swedenborg said insanity was a screen. So I think are the active trades and professions that employ and educate and restrain so many thousands of unbelievers. We are screened from premature ideas. One of the tests of sanity is repose. I demand of a great spirit entire self-command. He must be free and detached and take the world up into him, and not suggest the idea of a restless soul bestridden all way by an invisible rider. He must not be feverish, but free. A divine man, be assured, will not be impudent. An angel may indeed come to Heliodorus all wrath, but its terror will be beautiful. I am very sensible to beauty in the human form, in children and boys and girls and old men and old women. No trait of beauty, I think, escapes me. So I am to beauty in nature. A clump of flags in a stream, a hill, a wood, a path running into the woods captivate me as I pass. If you please to tell me that I have no just relish for the beauty of man or of nature, it would not disturb me certainly. I do not know but it may be so, and that you have so much juster, deeper, richer knowledge as that I, when I come to know it, shall say the same thing. But now your telling me that I do not love nature will not in the least annoy me. I should still have a perfect conviction that, love it or love it not, every bough that waved, every cloud that floated, every water ripple is and must remain a minister to me of mysterious joy. But I hear occasionally young people dwelling with emphasis on beauties of nature, which may be there or may be not, but which I do not catch, and blind at the same time to the objects which give me most pleasure. I am quite unable to tell the difference, only I see that they are less easily satisfied than I, that they talk where I would be silent, and clamorously demand my delight where it is not spontaneous. I fancy the love of nature of such persons is rhetorical. If, however, I tell them, as I am moved to do, that I think they are not susceptible of this pleasure, straightway they are offended, and set themselves at once to prove to me with many words that they had always had a remarkable delight in solitude and in nature. They even affirm it with tears. Then can I not resist the belief that the sense of joy from every pebble, stake, and dry leaf is not yet opened in them. Quote, Hope, the master element of a commanding genius, Coleridge, Macbeth. I doubt the statement. There is somewhat low in hope. Faith or trust, yes. Trust, the conviction that all is well, that good and God is at the center, will always rest as basis to the intellectual and outward activity of a great man, but this may coexist with great despondence and apathy as to the present order of things and of persons. November 7th. Freedom. I will, I think, no longer do things unfit for me. Why should I act the part of the silly women who send out invitations to many persons and receive each billet of acceptance as if it were a pistol shot? Why should I read lectures with care and pain and afflict myself with all the meanness of ticket-mongering, when I might sit, as God in his goodness has enabled me, a free, poor man with wholesome bread and warm clothes, though without cakes or gewgaws, and write and speak the beautiful and formidable words of a free man? If you cannot be free, be as free as you can. November 8th. The Asylums of the Mind. I have said on a former page that natural science always stands open to us as any asylum, and that, in the conflict with the common cares, we throw an occasional affectionate glance at lichen and fungus, barometer and microscope, as cities of refuge to which we can one day flee, if the worst come to the worst. Another asylum is in the exercise of the fancy. Puck and Oberon, Tam O'Shanter and Lily's Park, the troubadours and old ballads are bowers of joy that beguile us of our woes, catch us up into short heavens, and drown all remembrance, and that too without a death tramp of Eumenides being heard close behind, as behind other revels. Better still it is to soar into the heaven of invention, and coin fancies of our own, weave a web of dreams as gay and beautiful as any of these our brothers have done, and learn by bold attempt our own riches. As the body is rested and refreshed by riding in the saddle after walking, and by walking again after the saddle, or as new muscles are called into play in climbing a hill, and then in descending or walking on the plain, an analogous joy and strength flows from this exercise. Let no man despise these entertainments as if it were mere luxury in the drunkard's bowl. These airy realms of perpetual joy are also in nature, and what they are may well move the deep wonder and inquisition of the coldest and surliest philosopher. So is music an asylum. It takes us out of the actual and whispers to us dim secrets that startle our wonder as to who we are, and for what, whence, and where to. All the great interrogatories, like questioning angels, float in on its waves of sound. Away, away, said Richter to it, thou speakest to me of things which in all my endless being I have found not and shall not find. So is beauty an asylum. Asylums, books, natural science, fancy, music, beauty. Everything must have its flower or effort at the beautiful, finer or coarser according to its stuff. The architect not only makes sewers and offices, but halls and chapels. The carpenter of a village farmhouse expends his taste and ornament on the front door. The cook rejoices in his dinner, the laborer has his Sunday clothes, the poorest Irish scullion has her ribbon and tags of finery. And in society, the senses and the appetites, the life of the actual world, has also its virtues or seemings. Thus, in the planting states, where the whole culture is a culture of appearance, exists what is called a romantic state of society, and the wine-bibber and drabber is yet required to meet blow with blow and pistol with pistol. It makes little difference, the circumstance. Obedience or disobedience is all. We read Lear and hate the unkind daughters, But meantime, perhaps our fathers and mothers find us hard and forgetful. We swell the cry of horror at the slaveholder, and we treat our laborer or grocer or farmer as a thing, and so hold slaves ourselves. Not always shall we need to avoid society. When many men have been bred with God, they are able to know God in each other. Yea, whoever has come to a steady communion with him can well come into society. Remember Hampden's letter to Eliot. Let me never fall into the vulgar mistake of dreaming that I am persecuted whenever I am contradicted. No man, I think, had ever a greater well-being with a less desert than I. I can very well afford to be accounted bad or foolish by a few dozen or a few hundred persons. I, who see myself greeted by the good expectation of so many friends far beyond any power of thought or communication of thought residing in me. Besides, I own, I am often inclined to take part with those who say I am bad or foolish, for I fear I am both. I believe and know there must be a perfect compensation. I know too well my own dark spots. Not having myself attained, not satisfied myself, far from a holy obedience, how can I expect to satisfy others to command their love? A few sour faces, a few biting paragraphs, is but a cheap expiation for all these shortcomings of mine. November 9th. With the vision of this world, the fugitive measures of time and space shall vanish. Spirit can crowd eternity into an hour, or stretch an hour to eternity. This superstition about magnitude and duration is a classification for beginners introductory to the real classification of cause and effect, as the Linnaean botany gives way to the natural classes of Jussieu. Why should that complex fact we call Assyria, with its hundreds of years, its thousands of miles, its millions of souls, be to me more than a violet which I pluck out of the grass? It stands for about so much. It awakens perchance not so much emotion and thought. I surely shall not cumber myself to make it more. Everything passes for what it is worth. Shakespeare. Read Lear yesterday and Hamlet today with new wonder, and mused much on the great soul whose authentic signs flashed on my sight in the broad continuous daylight of these poems. Especially I wonder at the perfect reception this wit and immense knowledge of life and intellectual superiority find in us all in connection with our utter incapacity to produce anything like it. The superior tone of Hamlet, and in all conversations how perfectly preserved, without any mediocrity, much less any dullness in the other speakers. How real the loftiness, an inborn gentleman, and above that an exalted intellect. What incessant growth and plenitude of thought, pausing on itself never an instant, and each sally of wit sufficient to save the play. How true then and unerring the earnest of the dialogue, as when Hamlet talks with the queen, how terrible his discourse. What less can be said of the perfect mastery, as by a superior being, of the conduct of the drama, as the free introduction of this capital advised to the players? The commanding good sense which never retreats except before a Godhead, which inspires certain passages. The more I think of it, the more I wonder. I will think nothing impossible to man. No Parthenon, no sculpture, no picture, no architecture can be named beside this. All this is perfectly visible to me and to many. The wonderful truth and mastery of this work, of these works, yet for our lives could not I, or any man, or all men, produce anything comparable to one scene in Hamlet or Lear. With all my admiration of this lifelike picture, set to me to produce a match for it, and I should instantly depart into mouthing rhetoric. Now why is this, that we know so much better than we do, that we do not yet possess ourselves, and know at the same time that we are much more? One other fact Shakespeare presents us, that not by books are great poets made. Somewhat and much he unquestionably owes to his books. But you could not find in his circumstances the history of his poem. It was made without hands in his invisible world. A mightier magic than any learning, the deep logic of cause and effect he studied. Its roots were cast so deep, therefore it flung out its branches so high. I find no good lives. I would live well, I seem to be free to do so, yet I think with very little respect of my way of living. It is weak, partial, not full, and not progressive. But I do not see any other that suits me better. The scholars are shiftless, and the merchants are dull. Expression of faces. In many faces we are struck with the fact that magnitude is nothing, proportion is all. A brow may be so formed that in its few square inches I may receive the impression of vast spaces. What amplitude, what fields of magnanimity, of trust, of humanity. November 10th. Here's a note from the editor. The opening entry of this date is the passage in "history" in essay page 6, as to our reading as superior beings and in the grandest strokes of the author feeling most at home. Also about our sympathy with riches and character. This is followed by the passage in "intellect" as to our being draftsmen in dreams. Essays, first series, page 337. Shakespeare fills us with wonder the first time we approach him. We go away and work and think for years and come again. He astonishes us anew. Then, having drank deeply and saturated us with his genius, we lose sight of him for another period of years. By and by we return, and there he stands immeasurable as at first. We have grown wiser, but only that we should see him wiser than ever. He resembles a high mountain which the traveler sees in the morning, and thinks he shall quickly near it and pass it and leave it behind. But he journeys all day till noon, till night. There still is the dim mountain close by him, having scarce altered its bearing since the morning light. My brave Henry Thoreau walked with me to Walden this afternoon, and complained of the proprietors, who compelled him, to whom, as much as to any, the whole world belonged, to walk in a strip of road, and crowded him out of all the rest of God's earth. He must not get over the fence, but to the building of that fence he was no party. Suppose, he said, some great proprietor, before he was born, had bought up the whole globe, so he had been hustled out of nature. Not having been privy to any of these arrangements, he does not feel called on to consent to them, and so cuts fish poles in the woods without asking who has a better title to the wood than he. I defended, of course, the good institution as a scheme, not good, but the best that could be hit on for making the woods and waters and fields available to wit and worth, and for restraining the bold, bad man. At all events, I begged him, having this maggot of freedom and humanity in his brain, to write it out into good poetry, and so clear himself of it. He replied that he feared that that was not the best way, that in doing justice to the thought, the man did not always do justice to himself. The poem ought to sing itself. If the man took too much pains with the expression, he was not any longer the idea himself. I acceded, and confessed that this was the tragedy of art, that the artist was at the expense of the man, and hence, in the first age, as they tell, the sons of God printed no epics, carved no stone, painted no pictures, built no road, for the sculpture, the poetry, the music, and architecture were in the man. And truly bolts and bars do not seem to me the most exalted or exalting of our institutions. And what other spirit reigns in our intellectual works? We have literary property. The very recording of a thought betrays a distrust that there is any more or much more as good for us. If we felt that the universe was ours, that we dwelled in eternity and advanced into all wisdom, we should be less covetous of these sparks and cinders. Why should we covetously build a St. Peter's if we had the seeing eye, which beheld all the radiance of beauty and majesty in the matted grass and the overarching boughs? Why should a man spend years upon the carving in Apollo, who looked Apollos into the landscape with every glance he threw? Always pay, for first or last you must pay your entire expense. Should not the will be dramatized in a man who put him where you would, commanded, and who saw what he willed come to pass? A supreme commander over all his passions and affections as much as Hampden, yet the secret of his power is higher than that. It is God in the hands. Men and women are his game. Where they are, he cannot be without resource. Shall I introduce you to Mr. R, to Madame B? No, he replies, introduction is for dolls. I have business with A and with B. Will never consults the law or prudence or uses any paltry expedient like that falsely ascribed to St. Paul about the unknown God. Tricks, saith Will, for little folks. I am dearer to you than your laws, for which neither you nor I care a pin. He is a cool fellow. Everybody in the street reminds us of somewhat else. Will or reality reminds you of nothing else. It takes place of the whole creation. Quote, He'd harpet a fish out of salt water, or water out of a stone, or milk out of a maiden's breast that barren had never none. End quote. That line is from Glen Kitty in Child's English and Scottish Ballads. The counterpart to this master in my drama should be a maiden, one of those natural magnets who make place and court where they are. She should serve in menial office, and they who saw her should not know it, for what she touched she decorated, and what she did the stars and moon do stoop to see. But this magnetism should not be meant for him, and he should only honor it as he went by. It is to work on others, on another as a balance to him, or, if I may refine so far, another Richmond, a transmuted will infused into form, and now unconscious, yet omnipotent as before, and in a sweeter way. November 12th. I could forgive your want of faith if you had any knowledge of the uttermost that man could be and do, if arithmetic could predict the last possibilities of instinct. But men are not made like boxes, 100 or 1,000 to order, and all exactly alike, of known dimension and all their properties known. But no, they come into nature through a 9 months' astonishment, and of character each one incalculable, and of extravagant possibilities. Out of darkness and out of the awful cause they come to be caught up into this vision of a seeing, partaking, acting, and suffering life, not foreknown, not forestimable, but slowly or speedily they unfold new, unknown, mighty traits. Not boxes, but these machines are alive, agitated, fearing, sorrowing. Great men. I like the rare, extravagant spirits who disclose to me new facts in nature. Always, I doubt not, men of God have, from time to time, walked among men and made their commission felt in the heart and soul of the commonest hearer. Hence, evidently, the tripod, the priest, the inspired priestess, with the divine afflatus. They saw it was not of the common natural life. They felt its consonance with the inmost constitution of man, and revered it, without the attempt to reconcile it to the actual life. Swedenborg is now scarce, yet appreciable. Shakespeare has for the first time in our time found adequate criticism, if indeed ye have yet found it. Coleridge, Lamb, Schlegel, Goethe, Very, Herder. The great facts of history are 4 or 5 names: Homer, Phidias, Jesus, Shakespeare. 1 or 2 names more I will not add, but see what these names stand for. All civil history and all philosophy consists of endeavors more or less vain to explain these persons. November 13th. Yesterday H.G.O. Blake spent with me, and departed this morning. We walked in the woods to the cliff, to the spring, and had social music. Ah, memory, dear daughter of God, thy blessing is millionfold. The poor, short, lone fact that dies at the birth thou catchest up and bathest in immortal waters. Then 1,000 times over it lives and acts again, each time transfigured, ennobled. Then in solitude and darkness I walk over again my sunny walks. In streets behold again the shadows of my grey birches and the still river. Hear the joyful voices of my brothers 1,000 times over, and vibrate anew to the tenderness and dainty music of the early poetry I fed upon in boyhood. As fair to me the clump of flags that bent over the water, as if to see its own beauty below, one evening last summer, as any plants that are growing there today. At this hour the stream is flowing, though I hear it not. The plants are drinking their accustomed life, and repaying it with their beautiful forms, but I need not wander thither. It flows for me, and they grow for me in the returning images of former summers. Fire, Aunt Mary said, was a great deal of company, and so is their company I find in water. It animates the solitude. Then somewhat nearer to human society is the hermit birds that harbor in the wood. I can do well for weeks with no other society than the partridge and the jay, my daily company. The miraculous, said Samson Reed, is the measure of our alienation from God. It is so in persons as much as in facts. The child is a realization of a remembrance, and our love of the child is an acknowledgment of the beauty of human nature. The soul subtends the same angle in the child and in the man. The proportion of each is the same, and the central power and magnitude, whether of space or time, disappears in the eye of God. Gladly I would solve, if I could, this problem of a vocabulary which, like some treacherous wide shoal, waylays the tall bark, the goodly soul, and there it founders and suffers shipwreck. In common life, every man is led by the nose by a verb. Even the great and gifted do not escape, but with great talents and partial inspiration have local cramps, withered arms, and mortification. Proportion is not. Every man is lopsided, and even holding in his hand some authentic token and gift of God, holds it awry. It must be from everlasting and from the infinitude of God that when God speaketh, he should then and there exist, should fill the world with his voice, should scatter forth light, nature, time, souls, from the center of the present thought, and new date and new create the whole. The present hour is the descending God, and all things obey. All the past exists to it as subordinate, all the future is contained in it. All things are made sacred by relation to it, one thing as much as another. It smooths down the mountainous differences of appearance, and breathes one life through creation from side to side. If a man interposes betwixt you and your Maker himself, or some other person or persons, believe him not. God has better things for you. This should be plain enough. Yet see how great and vivacious souls, with grand truths in their keeping, do fail in faith to see God face to face, to see time pass away and be no more, and to utter directly from him that which he would give them to say, but rather imprison it in the old Hebrew language, mimic David, Jeremiah, and Paul, and disbelieve that God, who maketh the stars and stones sing, can speak our English tongue in Massachusetts, and give as deep and glad a melody to it as shall make the whole world and all coming ages ring with the sound. Be assured we shall not always set so great a price on a few texts, on a few lives. November 14th. This palsy of tradition goes so far that when a soul, in which the intellectual activity is a balance for the veneration, whose excess seems to generate this love of the old word, renounces the superstition out of love for the primary teaching in his heart, the doctors of the Church are not glad, as they ought to be, that a new and original confirmation comes to the truth, but they curse and swear because he scorns their idolatry of the nouns and verbs, the vellum and ink, in which the same teaching was anciently conveyed. I said in the wood to the soul that I received thankfully the reprieve which kind and candid opinions make to the dark and steep and painful road which truth must travel, and it seemed to me the while that man never appears to such advantage as in the act of acknowledgment with melting eye and plaintive voice. What is the hardest task in the world? To think. Musical eyes. I think sometimes that my lack of musical ear is made good to me through my eyes. That which others hear, I see. All the soothing, plaintive, brisk, or romantic moods which corresponding melodies waken in them, I find in the carpet of the wood, in the margin of the pond, in the shade of the hemlock grove, or in the infinite variety and rapid dance of the treetops as I hurry along. Knowledge of character. We are all born discerners of spirits. November 15th. A pathetic thing it is that we allow men of talents and characters in which we are interested, to which we are naturally allied, to go by us without heed and the tribute of our sympathy, because of our momentary preoccupation with some nearer object, use hospitality to thoughts. One wise word. A single remark indicating wisdom characterizes the person who made it. All we know of him is these dozen words. Yet patiently, with a good assurance, we wait until he shall make good that pledge in a whole orbit as grand as that curve. November 16th. All we are responsible for is the will, but your will cannot always make you appear well. In the presence of a man or woman of elegance and fashionable manners, you do not play a quite manly part. Where is your wisdom? Why falters the word of truth on your tongue, and comes so lamely and inarticulately off? Why do you defer to such persons? Have you not been taught of God that all things are yours? Why should you decline from the state of truth, and veil your manly supremacy to a woman or a fine gentleman? It is in vain these questions are asked. You have asked them yourself. You cannot do otherwise. Admit your weakness. Do not be disturbed by it. Keep your will true and erect, and by this rebellious blood, this painful suppleness, this epilepsy of the wit will pass away imperceptibly, and the whole man shall be the faithful organ of the wisdom which is no respecter of persons. Books. You are wrong in demanding of the Bible more than can be in a book. Its only defect is that it is a book and not alive. Quote, Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. What? Art? Hamlets? Ballads? The life is more than meat, and the body than raiment. The soul. He judgeth every man, yet is judged of no man. November 17th. The Traveler. It occurs to me that, in remembrance of my own extreme needs when I was in Europe, I ought to keep by me a blank book to be called The Traveler, and from time to time insert in it the names and places of such objects as a student of art or of natural beauty or of history should especially visit. So shall I have a useful gift for those who, having eyes, cross the ocean. I am reminded of this project by the notice of Giotto's frescoes at Pisa in Coleridge's Table Talk, Volume 1, pages 123, 124. See also Ibidem, page 138. Quote, Poets are guardians of admiration in the hearts of the people. End quote. Fine offices are discharged by the men of literary and poetic faculty everywhere. Each has certain opinions, tastes, shades of thought, which go at large in the great common world of men, of books, selecting every connate fact, particle, word, relation, work of art, until by and by that which was or might seem a mere whimsy or trifle, not worth the entertainment of a thought, has grown to some size and is ready to be borne. Jones Very said to me in the woods, one might forget here that the world was desert and empty, all the people wicked, and ignored the whole refreshment of consolatory aspect of the natural sciences, of the telescope and barometer. In Coleridge's Table Talk, Volume 1, page 129, I find the following, quote, John Thewell had something very good in him. We were once sitting in a beautiful recess in the Quantocks, when I said to him, Citizen John, this is a fine place to talk treason in. Nay, Citizen Samuel, replied he, it is rather a place to make a man forget that there is any necessity for treason. November 18th. The infallible index of true progress is found in the tone the man takes. The Swedenborgian violates the old law of rhetoric and philosophy. Nec Deus intersit dignus nisi vindis nodus, in its forcible interposing of a squadron of angels for the transmission of thought from God to man. I say I think or I receive in proportion to my obedience truth from God. I put myself aside and let him be. The New Churchman says, no, that would kill you if God should directly shine into you. There is an immense continuity of mediation, as if that bridged the gulf from the infinite to the finite by so much as one plank. Would he not kill the highest angel into whom he shone just as quick? November 25th. At Portsmouth, Mr. Haven described the passage to the guillotine of Manuel and General Houchard as he saw it in Paris. Alfred Haven remarked, when I said that universalism certainly covered a truth, that never a soul was without hope of life everlasting, and of course no soul was ever fully convinced that it deserved hell, and of course God would justify his act to the soul of the sinner. I remember that when I preached my first sermon in Concord on showing piety at home, Dr. Ripley remarked on the frequent occurrence of the word virtue in it, and said his people would not understand it, for the largest part of them, when virtue was spoken of, understood chastity. I do not imagine, however, that the people thought any such thing. It was an old school preacher's contractedness. The great distinction between teachers, sacred or literary, between poets like Herbert and poets like Warton, between philosophers like Coleridge and philosophers like Mackintosh, between talkers like Reed and Very and talkers like Walker and Ripley, is that one class speak ab intra and the other class ab extra. It is of no use to preach to me ab extra. I can do that myself. Jesus preaches always ab intra, and so infinitely distinguishes himself from all others. And that is the miracle. That includes the miracle. My soul believes beforehand that it ought so to be. That is what I mean when I say I look for a teacher, as all men do say. If, however, you preach ab extra, at least confess it. Say, come, let us do thus and so, and not affect to say, come thou up hither. For thy pretension deceives nobody. Thy body, I can see well enough, stands above me in a pulpit, but thy soul, I can see as well, stands down on my own or even a lower level. That is the essential distinction of genius, the charm of its every syllable, that they are an emanation of that very thing or reality they tell of, and not merely an echo or picture of it. See these lines of Edward Powell to Fletcher, quote, Fletcher, whose wit was not an accident to the soul, but it, only diffused, thus with the same sun call, moving eye the sphere, or shining on a wall. How incalculable and potent seems to me the stroke and glances of a few mystics, saints, and philosophers whom I have seen and reverenced, living within the veil of their sanctuaries. How feeble and calculable the uttermost that modish divines, writers, and readers can say. This is the reason why you must respect all your private impressions. A few anecdotes, a few traits of character, manners, face, a few incidents have an emphasis in your memory out of all proportion to their apparent significance, if you measure them by the ordinary standards of history. Do not for this a moment doubt their value to you. They relate to you, to your peculiar gift. Let them have all their weight, and do not reject them and cast them about for illustration and facts more usual in English literature. Swedenborg taught ab intra, and in music Beethoven, and whosoever like him grandly renounces all forms, societies, and laws as impediments, and lives in, on, and for his genius and guiding idea. How great the influence of such, how it rebukes, how it invites and raises me. My soul answers them, saying, so it is, even as I have heard, it is no dream. God is, and there is a heaven for his saints, and that heaven is obedience to him. I hear ye what ye say, great servants of my Lord. I also believe. Lord, help mine unbelief. The fine account I read of Beethoven was translated from Bettina van Arnhem's correspondence with Goethe, and a notice of that book in the London Gentleman's Magazine for October 1838. A man of letters who goes into fashionable society on their terms, and not on his own, makes a fool of himself. Why I should be given up to that shame so many times after so much considered experience, I cannot tell. Heaven has good purposes in these often mortifications, perchance. It is strange to me how sensible I am to circumstances. I know not how it is, but in the streets I feel mean. If a man should accost me in Washington Street and call me a base fellow, I should not be sure that I could make him feel by my answer and behavior that my ends were worthy and noble. If the same thing should occur in the country, I should feel no doubt at all that I could justify myself to his conscience. Sir Thomas Browne. George Haven at Portsmouth read me noble passages in Sir Thomas Browne's writing. How inward he is! What a true example of the noble daring of a thinker who sees that the soul alone is real, and that it is a true wisdom to launch abroad into its deep and push his way as far as any glimmer of light is given, though the element and the path be in wild contradiction to any use or practice of this world. Boys and Girls. The strong bent of nature is very prettily seen in the winning, half artful, half artless ways of young girls in the middle classes who go into the shops to buy a skein of silk or a sheet of paper and talk half an hour about nothing with a broad-faced, good-natured shop-boy. November 26th. Impotent creatures that we are, stung by this desire for thought, we run up and down into booksellers' shops, into colleges, into athenaeums, into the studies of learned men. The moment we receive a new thought, it is the identical thing we had before with a new mask, and therefore, though hailed as authentic, yet as soon as we have received it, we desire another new one. We are not really enriched. But when we receive it, we are beatified for the time. We seem to be capable of all thought. We are on a level, then, with all intelligences. We cast all books and teachers behind us. What have I to do with means when I am in the presence of the infinite light? And yet, familiar as that state of mind is, the books of Bacon and Leibniz still retain their value from age to age. So impassable is, at last, that thin, imperceptible boundary between perfect understanding of the author, perfect fellowship with him, quasi-consciousness of the same gifts, and the faculty of subordinating that rapture to the will in such degree as to be able ourselves to conjoin and record our states of mind. I have written above that the price of the picture indicates the odds that exist against the appearance of a genius pure as Raphael or Angelo. So is the glory of the name of Shakespeare, Bacon, Milton, an index of the exceeding difficulty with which the reader who perfectly understands what they say, and sees no reason why he should not continue the sentence, overleaps that invisible barrier and continues the sentence. Whilst he reads, the drawbridge is down. Nothing hinders that he should pass with the author. When he essays to write, lo, suddenly the draw is up and will not down. November 27th. The brilliant young student, full of philosophy and happy in the faculty of unfolding and illustrating his theories, should dread his own theories. They are snares for his own feet. We put our love where we have put our labor. Having done so well, having won so much praise by them, and so many opinions, how can he turn his back on them and follow the great light of truth to which these were only porches? Yet must you leave your theory as Joseph his coat in the hand of the harlot and flee. I have no less disgust than any other as the cant of spiritualism. I had rather hear a round volley of Ann Street oaths than the affectation of that which is divine on the foolish lips of the coxcombs. The man who fears and is therefore intolerant indicates at once that he is not yet grounded in the soul. For lack of his natural root, he clings by tendrils of affection to society, mayhap to what is best and greatest in it, and in calm times it will not appear that he is adrift and not moored. But let any disorder take place in society, any revolution of custom, of law, of opinion, and instantly his whole type of permanence is rudely shaken. In the disorder of society, universal disorder seems to him to take place, chaos is come again, and his despair takes at first the form of rage and hatred against the act or actor which has broken the seeming peace of nature. But the fact is, he was already a driving wreck before the wind arose, which merely revealed to him his vagabond state. If a man is at one with the soul, and in all things obeyeth it, society becomes to him at once a fair show and reflection of that which he knoweth beforehand in himself. If anyone affirm a strange doctrine, or do a wild deed, or if any perversity or profligacy appears in the whole society, he will see it for what it is, and grieve for it as a man and member of society, but it will not touch him with resentment, it will not cast one shadow over the lofty brow of the soul. The soul will not grieve. The soul sits behind there in a serene peace. Not jot or tittle of its convictions can either be shaken or confirmed. It sees already in the abolition of sin the simultaneous remedy arising. This is the city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Phrenology and animal magnetism are studied a little in the spirit in which alchemy and witchcraft are the black art were, namely, for power. That vitiates and besmirches them and makes them black arts. All separation of the soul's things from the soul is suicidal. So are phrenology and animal magnetism damned. Extremes meet. The sublime of war and the Iliad meets the doctrine of one mind. Hector says to Ajax, "Exchange some gift, that Greece and Troy may say, not hate but glory made these chiefs contend, and each brave foe was in his soul a friend." Iliad, Book 7. The test of a religion or philosophy is the number of things it can explain. So true is it. But the religion of our churches explain neither art nor society nor history, but itself needs explanation. Whence this fact that the natural history of man has never been written? Whence, but because God inhabits man and cannot be known but by God? The ancients affirmed the incorruptibility of the world. A modern geology teaches the same doctrine in the perpetual renewing of what is perpetually consumed. Races pass and perish. Cities fall and fall like the perpetual succession of shells on the beach. And the sound of the waters and the colors of the flower cloud and the voice of man are as new and affecting today as at any moment in the vast past. From the Editor. On December 5th, Mr. Emerson began his course of 10 lectures in Boston, 1 week, the subject being Human Life, as follows. 1. Doctrine of the Soul. Parts of this were printed later in The Oversoul. 2. Home. 3. School. 4. Love. 5. Genius. 6. The Protest. 7. Tragedy. 8. Comedy. 9. Duty. 10. Demonology. This is the end of journal collection number 29. In the next video we will proceed to journal 30, which covers the year 1839. Thank you for listening.